I thought it was a great day. I did, and it was good to see the women's final being played as a curtain raiser. There was, the crowd was looking fairly healthy towards the back end of that game as people got in a little bit early. And as you rightly said, the atmosphere that was generated, we were sort of more towards the Hull KR end, in fairness, but the atmosphere that was generated from both sets of fans was great. And as you rightly said, imagine what it would have been like, I suppose, if you'd got, I don't know, what was it, 58, another 10, another 20,000. But it was a great atmosphere, and it's just a shame when people talk about the magic of the cup. I think the magic of the cup's still there, and I actually don't think it's that much money in the grand scheme of things.
Not for 3 games.
You can get a ticket from £20. You share your travel in a car on the way down, or you get your bus, subsidised bus from the club or whatever. In the grand scheme of things, I don't quite get this argument about. I appreciate. I think in terms of Magic Weekend, I think that has taken something away from the Challenge Cup final, because I'm not convinced you get the same level of neutrals that you used to get in sort of decades gone by.
It was hard to say whether there were more neutrals there this year because there were 6 different teams. I don't know how you calculate that. To the naked eye, you're still not getting all the. I didn't see a Whitehaven scarf. I might have,
but in fairness,
30 years ago. Somebody's now going to send us it.
There will be.
Here.
There will have been.
And there will have been there. But you used to get that sense. We were there quite early, hence the £15 parking. But don't tell me what it was. And normally, as you see people coming into the stadium, you can identify which club they're from, and you go, "Oh, I'm Slater here." Or I didn't really see that.
No, but we didn't move around that much, did we? And I think I didn't spot where the Batley fans or where the Halifax fans were sitting until the men's final had finished and people had left the stadium, and then they sort of emerged. They were there, but you didn't spot them. And I think that's probably the thing with neutrals, is that they were probably there. And I think some neutrals stayed for that 1895. Some appeared to leave at half time,
but again, the debate about the 1895 is where do you cite it and how do you promote it. But if you've got the women's final and the BBC are taking the first 2, then it has to go third. Credit also to the Batley and the Halifax fans, because they never lessened their support and fervour. Again, there might have been, and I'm guessing, and I don't want to do either of them a disservice, a couple of thousand of each, maybe a few more Halifax. So if you had in that stadium, let's say 6,000 fans, it didn't detract from the element that it was Wembley. You try and tell those 6,000 that they shouldn't have been at Wembley and we need to move it somewhere else, or it meant everything to those fans.
It loses something. Say if you move it to, I don't know, wherever, Aston Villa or whatever, Everton's new stadium,
or if you play at 8 o'clock in the morning because you want it on before the.
I just think it loses something by not being at Wembley. It still carries that prestige, and people making that sort of trip down to London. So for me, I still think the stadium is the right place. I think it's just about how do you get more people there. When you look back at the history, I sort of had a quick look today that 2018 Catalan played Warrington 50,000, inevitably because it was probably Catalan. But then, ignoring the St Helens Castleford final in 21, because that was affected by COVID, there was a limit on the number of people that you could get in there. It was only really last year's at 51,000, and before then you have to go back to 1945-46 to see a similar crowd.
And the other thing that was made mention, though, is that when we did the initial deal with the new Wembley, so 2007 to 2017, included in that were all the debenture holders, because they got a 10-year ticket for contributing to the cost of the new stadium. That meant they could go to any event. So we were at liberty to include 15,000 whether they turned up or not. So all of those crowds from 2007 to 17 take 15,000.
Little asterisk gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look back at the pictures, they are bigger crowds during that period. But you're right. I don't know. There was some traffic. There obviously were traffic issues on Saturday, and I know people that didn't go in the end and they turned back round. But it didn't for me take whatever it was, 15,000 off the gate.
If they'd already bought a ticket, you would be including that. It's just that they weren't there to hand their ticket over. I think we get too obsessed with crowds, and I don't think the issue necessarily is the teams that play. I think we did get more this year because it was 2 teams who haven't been there for a very long time, but I just think it's the romance has gone because we know it's going to be 2 Super League teams.
Yeah, but if you're in the Championship and League One, you've known in the last however many decades the chances of you getting to the final is almost slim to none.
But that's why the 1895 it needs building up.
But then all you're doing there is you're just getting the teams from those 2 Championship teams going probably, and you're not encouraging other Championship League One teams. I don't know how you got. For me, you've got a good look at the sort of rugby union model, whereby they sort of put the emphasis back on community clubs.
Yeah, which you can't do
to sell tickets.
Because everybody's away.
Well, that's why you have
holidays.
to move away from the summer
Yes.
holidays, and I don't know to what extent they still do this, but the RFL employed staff to almost just solely look at school trips and community club trips, where they put on coach travel, subsidised coach travel to sell tickets, and
which they can now do in June.
Yeah, and hopefully that move back, and if they can keep a settled date for the Challenge Cup final, then that should help matters, so that each year you know that if it's the 8th of June or thereabouts, you're going to go make a trip to Wembley.
I think the other thing as well is that the end of the season, particularly the end of the Super League season, but also the same in the Championship, you're into paid playoffs and finals. If you put the Challenge Cup final too near them, and you throw in for Super League clubs a trip to Catalan, and you're throwing in for Championship clubs a potential trip to Toulouse, which everybody would like to do if they can afford it, because they've all heard what a great time it is, and even clubs, like Batley, when they played there the other week, there's suddenly 300 or 400 Batley fans going to Toulouse and having a fantastic time. So you factor that in. You need to move the Challenge Cup away from that expense, and we haven't done that. So to move the Challenge Cup to even later in the season, suggestions are, we used to have the Challenge Cup final one week and the Championship final the following week, or vice versa. We just, as fans, do not have the amount of money to do that. So do it in June. Get special deals, particularly for schools, especially schools that play, in the champion schools. Maybe one of the things could be
which you actually couldn't go and watch because the stadium wasn't open.
But one of the ideas of having
champion schools at for your school at any level, and you get subsidised tickets to go to the final.
But one of the ideas of having a blank weekend is that you get the people from those clubs that otherwise will be playing go into the game, and so that's for me again why you have to tap in. And I think there was some criticism, I don't know why, on social media of Wakefield and
what have we done
about putting on coach travel.
We've done something positive. Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course you
Every
do.
club should be doing that.
Well, the strange thing about this, Wakefield do that every year. The supporters club do that every year.
Yeah, but that's what that's what should be happening.
Donkeys,
that's what should be happening for the Challenge Cup.
In terms of the women's game, talking about attendance, clearly we got the figure that they stopped counting at 1 o'clock, and it was 8,338, which was the biggest attendance there'd been for a Challenge Cup final. What we did find was that both Leeds and St Helens as clubs really backed this. So there were corporate parties there. There were, I think, again, subsidised travel from both of the clubs to get fans. That can only grow. The first time you do it, people watch and go, I think I wish I'd been there, because not only did it look like a good game, but it's worthy of going. If my team is, or I'm just a supporter of the women's game, I get the added value of 2 other matches after it. But I thought both of those clubs were absolutely admirable in the way they, the girls, women, ladies.
No, you're allowed to say girls. It's all right.
Set off.
The girls played well.
The day before,
Boys
they were given. They didn't have to sort of drive down at 4 o'clock in the morning, play a game, and then be back. They were treated in the way that the men's teams of those 2 clubs would have been treated if they'd got to Wembley. They were given the same access to the stadium for the captain's run. They were dressed. Yeah, I just thought there's a real starting point there for saying that's a great selling piece. That
can't go backwards.
Neutrals again may realise that no matter who was in that women's final, and let's be honest, for the next 3 or 4 years it's going to be York, Leeds, St Helens, or probably Wigan. It's worth going just to watch that as a neutral.
I'll read Andy's tweet because he pretty much summed up everything I wanted to say, but he's put it over 2 tweets, so I can just read him and you can decide whether you agree with him or not. It says, Kenny Mine moved the final from Wembley defence in early. KR fans travelled 140 miles in 3 matches to make it to Wembley. Leeds 308, and he's done maths and stuff. So the road to Wembley wasn't arduous. A day trip, weekend away of 400-ish miles in 2023 is hardly a trek to the Patagonian rainforest. The biggest issue is how the sport is perceived by those outside the village of Rugby League. We will become a provincial insignificance if we surrender Wembley and play the match in the Heartlands. The full stadium argument is a dead cat. Prestige is why Wembley needs to remain its home. You heard all the women in the build-up talk about they never thought it would happen to them. Batley, Halifax, same. Batley's never been to Wembley. Halifax not been there for a donkey's
1988.
Lee and Hulkar, all the build-up is around. Well, Lee were there. It's 1971. Sorry to mention that again, Phil.
It's all right.
Hulkar trying to pull away from the memories of 2015 or whatever. Going and as you both know, because you were both there in different capacities. Spurs, wonderful stadium, and not to take anything away from Spurs, playing international there would be great. If you do take the Challenge Cup final to Villa Park or the new Everton Stadium or Newcastle, it's gone. You don't, Wembley, for all its faults, and there are many of them, and we're not going to go back 30 years and have the debate about where the national stadium should be, because it's there now and they're not going to move it. All the history is there. As soon as you take that away, it doesn't have the same. We can move the grand final away from Old Trafford, and I don't think it would have the same effect, because although the Premiership's been played there since '87 and the grand final obviously since '88, it's just a football ground in the north of England.
Yeah. It's one of
Wembley.
When we went there, it was one of the best facilities we could have gone to that was accessible for the bulk of the fans that would be there. Challenge Cup is not that competition, and yeah, it would have been nice if it had been nearer purely from the logistics of getting there. But actually, it wasn't half a great day out.
Here are some comments from some people. You've all come in now, which is good. I'll come back to Frank's one about the penalty trying to cup final because I didn't see it. So not that I'm commenting on it anyway, of course. But Teddy says, I watched the men's and women's finals, but staying for the third game was too much for me. Sorry, you don't have to stay for all three.
No. Listen, it's there if you want it.
You don't have to apologise. You can stay for one game. It doesn't matter. Frank says 1895 cup final should be in before the men's. I think that's a TV decision.
Yeah,
they wouldn't have had the women's game on BBC Two. 2 hours of bargain hunt and then come back for the men's final. So it either
goes first or last, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you can't go in the middle.
And if we go on to
if it goes first, then you're either going to lose the under 7s game, or you're going to have the under 7s game at about 4 o'clock in the morning to get the 1895.
But you're also going to have that same debate, which is, and it goes back to Craig Lingard's point before and after the final. If a broadcaster doesn't want to show it, they ain't going to show it. We can't force the BBC to show a game they don't want to show. So, and there's no other broadcaster interested, regardless of where the 1895 Cup final is in the day. It's for us.
I think I'm not sure
it's for everyone, but
I think he had some very valid comments to say about whether the competition was treated with
the promotion.
Respect.
Yes, definitely.
I think also they announced that it was going to be on our league coming. What was it? 2 days before. Again, it's almost like we perhaps should have promoted that a couple of weeks before, so people knew that if they couldn't get down to Wembley, where they'd be able to see it. That sounded a bit haphazard. Now, again, logistics of that we're not privy to, other than we know that had it been produced by a different production company, there may well have been a charge for it. There may well have been a video ref as well, and there may well have been better graphics. But the fact that it was announced quite late with a company that doesn't have access to all that paraphernalia, that's what we got. Well, I think, due respect to the teams that were there, we need to get that bit sorted out earlier as well.
You should be able to sort that out at the start of the season, because it's going to happen. There's going to be an 18.
Well, maybe they were waiting for Premier to say if they were going to cover it, and clearly they're in a lot of financial problems and weren't going to pay for an extra game, which is what they might have been hoping they would do. But I think he had some very valid comments, certainly about the launch on the Monday, where they were clearly on the periphery compared to the men's and the women's. But the coverage needs to be known earlier, and then more people might have watched the R League and would have seen probably the best try scored at Wembley.
Absolutely fantastic final, says Chris. Gripping game that had it all. So good that in years to come no one will talk attendances. Keep it at Wembley. Sell out the bottom tier first before the top tier. I think they do try to do that, but
yeah, there were some people in the very top tier, which again will be the cheaper tickets. So you don't want to deny people the chance to pay what they can afford. But sometimes when you look there and you think, well, if you'd have had all 60,000 in 2 tiers, it would have looked and sounded better, because the television doesn't normally pick up the empty tier until, of course, it's celebration time.
I think
when you can't avoid it.
I think they did all they could. They blocked off the top tier behind the cameras, and the rest it has to be focused on getting people there, not hiding the fact that people aren't.
And I tend to get the tend to have the feeling that the people who moan most about the attendance are people who are never going to go, and regardless of if you paid them,
unless it's their team.
if you flew them down there in Rishi Sunak's helicopter and gave them the best seat in the house not next to Derek Bowman, because Amy McManus must have been furious. She'd been mauled throughout the game.
Bruised.
Next to Lindsay Hoyle. You get to give out the cup as well. They still would moan about the attendance because they ain't going. Moving away from Wembley would be suicide, says Teddy. It's the National Stadium steeped in history. You'd have to move the Rugby League statue if you moved it away from Wembley, says Chris. We mentioned this on the way down, well, I don't know where we were going to move it to. Sell it for scrap, probably.
I think the other thing as well is that the BBC have been long-time partners with the Challenge Cup, and again, if you look back in history, you're going to hear Eddie Waring commentating on the BBC. So, the 71 footage was Stuart Ferguson scoring and Eddie commenting on it, and Alex Murphy laying down when he should have been standing up, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not sure how much the BBC would want to keep giving it the coverage that it got if it wasn't at Wembley.
Because it's at the National Stadium at the end of the day. It has national significance, and it's a competition of
when the calendars are published in the newspapers at the beginning of the year, and we keep going on about, why are we never mentioned? The only thing that's ever in there is the Challenge Cup final, because it's on the BBC.
How you sell it? Do you have more entertainment around it? Do you sell it as a big day out? I don't know, but
not necessarily more entertainment, but what entertainment?
Yeah, because the stuff on the pitch sells itself.
There isn't very much time between the games, to be honest. I think that's the one thing you may have found being in the media area, that if you're trying to fully box off one game, the next game's just about.
Well, there wasn't much time between the games.
I mean, you barely had time to go back for your third sandwich.
No, that's true. Yeah.
For those
second chocolate brownie.
For those who didn't get any because there weren't any left by the time we were.
I mean, I managed to get about 2 of them, and I was up and down all over the place.
You're not allowed to say like a bride.
No, I wasn't going to say that, but you said it now. Good evening, gents. Says Carson. Challenge Cup was an amazing experience. He was there. The best thing were the people in and around the stadium. And to add to that, Carson, the people who work at Wembley, and I think I've said this before, brilliant. Can't fault the people at Wembley who work there.
Couldn't have been nicer or more helpful.
Excellent. A credit to the...
The thing is, if Carsten can get there from Switzerland with no vested interest in any of the teams that are going to be there, then I think we can get there from Burnley.